Hi, good evening, everyone. Welcome to another session of the African Music Library Instrument Discussion. Here we talk about variety of African instruments and also lean on those that double down as genres. I'm your host, Koso, and today we'll be talking about the Krakeb. But before we do the introduction for Krakeb, let me introduce to you some of the voices you'll be hearing through the course of our conversation. Today we have Emmanuel Gala, the president of Just Play and African Music Library. We have Anu Onosanya, the Director of Programs for the African Music Library. Here with us today, we also have George Ogala, who is COO of Just Play Music. And then we have Moyo Emmanuel, who is the lead for the QA team for Just Play. Please say hello to our listeners.
Hi, listeners. My name is Emmanuel.
Good evening. My name is Moya Sir Emmanuel. I hope to have a wonderful conversation.
Hi everyone, my name is George Ogala and I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi everyone, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the conversation. My name is Anu Onosaya.
Thank you, everyone. We are glad to have you on the show with us today to talk about this amazing, beautiful instrument with a lot of history. So let's get into the introduction and then we'll give room for our speakers to talk to us about this instrument. So the Krakeb is a large metal castanet or a clapper also, and it's the percussion backbone for the Gnawa music. And on the other hand, Gnawa music is a Moroccan music genre that emerged in the 16th, 17th century through the cultural fusion of different West African ethnic groups that were brought from the sub-Saharan Africa to Morocco during the slave trade. So these cultures fused with existing pre-Islamic cultures that were already in Morocco. But before we get into this information and talk about the significance and answer the questions that we have for this discussion today, I'll be calling on our first speaker, Anu Onosanya, to talk to us about the origin and historical context of this amazing instrument. Hi, Anu.
And the mythology as well.
And technology. Thank you very much, Emmanuel. Yeah, Anu, what can you tell us about this instrument?
Thank you very much, Kosi. Just listening to your foundational introduction of the Krakeb, it actually inspires, how will I put it, a desire to know more about the Krakeb. So the Krakeb, which sometimes is spelled as Krabe or a Qraqeb, I think maybe because of the Aramic English also, or will I say the Aramic phonology, and then sometimes it's called the Garagab or the Kakabas, has a very interesting origin, I must say that, and its origin is actually rooted in slavery, which is a very sad one. Most instruments you get to read about or learn about across Africa, most of these instruments, they actually have more like a cultural background. You see them have a religious, ceremonial foundation. For example, when we talked about the Ogini and then looking at the fishing village and then the iron smelting community, which were 70 miles apart and being able to come together and the instrument being transferred from one community to another to become a foundational instrument in their own religious occasions or ceremonies. But sadly for the Krakeb, it's different. The Krakeb has its origin rooted in slavery, which is very sad. But this time, not the transatlantic slavery, which most times we know about the West Africans being sold into slavery and taken to the Caribbeans to work in the farms, and in the plantations rather. But this time around is Africans within African from West Africa, particularly from Mali, then which was more of a very big kingdom, the Mandinka, and then also from Senegal, Chad, Nigeria. you see slaves being taken from the west coast, let me call it the west coast in Africa, and then taken to the northern part of Africa as slaves to actually work. And then these slaves went with their own tradition. Would have been nice if we had seen probably maybe a tablet, a scraping on a rock in a cave, or maybe some slaves documenting where they came from or the traditions they came with. But more of oral, how will I say, more of oral communication. These slaves actually got to North Africa. Interestingly, while that's around the 11th century, which went into the 16th and 17th century, and especially during this time, we actually had we like call them Arabians, or we like call them the Arabs, particularly dwelling in the northern part of Africa then, we very predominant with the Ottoman Empire, which spread from Turkey all the way to North Africa. So as the slaves got there, we know that the Arabs predominantly are Muslims. So these slaves got there, and one of the things they did was that they borrowed from the religion of the people they met there, and then also their own spiritual religion. They blended it together, and then also formed their own sound, developed their own instrument, which is now the Krakeb. But interestingly, it's also believed that even though you say that there's a merging of two distinct cultures, the traditional African culture from West Africa, and then the Muslim culture, or will I say the Muslim religion, be blended together. So you see the Krakeb now as an instrument which is central in this new religion that has evolved over the years among the Black slaves in Northern Africa, and then now becoming an identity or a symbol for their own new religion. As you know, Africans are very spiritual. So you see that spiritual essence being brought into Krakeb as an instrument and as a religion, and then also mixing it with Islam, and then forming their own unique religion. Interestingly, the Krakeb is said to have developed from the sounds of the chains that were used to bound the West African slaves, or when I say the Black slaves. So it's believed that this sound was what now actually inspired them to create, probably when they were on the field, the sound of the chains. As I said, it would have been lovely to be able to have an oral, or will I say an historical account from those slaves, probably documenting their experience and telling their story, how this evolution came about. Another school of thought also have it that it's also the sound of the horses that were used to carry these slaves away from West Africa when they were being bought. You know that within interland, when you're traveling from West Africa to North Africa, is mostly sand, where you have the Sahara Desert. So most likely, while they were moving through the sands of the Sahara Desert and the chains, these chains were clanging, were making noise, and with time, these guys using the sound probably to be able to dull the pain or dull the feelings of hopelessness that they were experiencing as they were being taken away from their homeland and taken to North Africa. So I think those are like the origins, but also I must also mention that in the origins of Krakeb, as we said, Africans naturally they have a measure of religiosity. A typical African, whether he's an atheist or not, there's still a measure of I serve something. You have some people come out to say that, oh, they don't believe in God, they believe in the traditional gods, but there's still this sense of acknowledging a supreme being. So in this fellowship, or will I say this religion that was being birthed from the chains of slavery, you see now the Africans or these slaves who are now maybe over the years, they've acclimatized, or will I say, they have now become part and parcel of the new lands that they were living. Just as how you have now in the Caribbean, you see some blacks, though some still say that, oh, that they are Africans, but you've seen them, they have now become part and parcel of the land which they were taking to over the generations that passed. So I must say that a very interesting thing is the Lila ceremonies. What actually brought about this? Probably the prayers were a source of comfort as slaves, aside the music. And then also slaves, who takes care of slaves? Really, you really see that slaves have to take care of themselves. And then you see that they, over years, they were able to also develop a, how will I say it, a religion which they call, which there's a performance called Lila, an overnight time of praying, fasting, and then communing with the spirit. I guess maybe those were times that the slaves had to look for a way to actually combat the reality of the life that they were living now. And then over the years, it now became a religion, became something that they had to live with because it has become part and parcel of them and has been a way of actually overcoming their challenges spiritually.
Thank you so much, Anu, for that. It was really interesting and enlightening listening to you talk about give us the historical context of this beautiful instrument. Like I mentioned before, it's embedded, truly embedded in history, and we have Anu to thank for talking to us about this context on our discussion today. Thank you very much, Anu. Also, to mention, it's also important to mention that this instrument is classified as an idiophone. And in the idiophone classification, you have the struck and the plucked idiophone. The plucked idiophone is where you have the lamellophones, the mbira. It is found in Southern Africa. And then under the struck idiophone, you have the directly struck idiophone and the indirectly struck idiophone. The directly struck idiophone is where you have the balaphone and the ogene of the Igbo people. And under the indirectly struck idiophone, you have the shaking and the scrapped idiophones. The shaking idiophone is where you have the popular shekere instruments, and then for the scrapped idiophone is where you have this amazing instrument, the Krakeb. So just to put that out there, and thank you again, Anu, for talking to us about this history. Yeah, I think Emmanuel has anything or two to add. Yeah, Emmanuel.
Thank you very much, Anna, for that historical review, and thank you, Kosi, for the explanation. I just wanted to add that this instrument is another example of the ingenuity of Africans, how we, as Africans, manage to make something really great out of a tragedy, out of a very sad situation. As Anu said, some school of thought believe that this instrument was built out of chains that were used to bound slaves by their enslavers, just because they didn't have access to resources to make music, but they had to carry the music of their ancestors. Music is a very essential part of an African life, and despite the slavery, whatever challenges people are presented, they make the best of those situations with whatever is available to them. One of the examples that we saw was in the presentation on bomba plena in Puerto Rico, where the drums were carved out of wine barrels, discarded wine barrels that enslavers had left in farms. And as you go across Africa, you see, and across the world, you see these kind of innovations that come out of these seriously sad situations and enslavement. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you very much, and Emmanuel, for pointing that out. I think this concept of Africans making out things to make themselves happy out of sad situations is something we can also see in the listening behavior, in the modern or recent music industry across Africa. Centuries later, we still have the same attitude and did the same love for music. So thank you so much, Emmanuel, for mentioning that. Also, going back to what Anu mentioned earlier about how we see the spelling of the Krakeb. She mentioned about the QRAQEB and then the KRAKEB. So for the one with the Q, I think it has some sort of Jewish roots. Just to explain further, reading across different researches online about this instrument and leaning more into the etymology and naming of the instrument, many researchers have mentioned about how unclear the etymology of the instruments is because the spelling does not appear in the standard Arabic with the literal meaning or the use of the instruments in cultures where they are found. But I actually have a hypothesis. Maybe I don't know if anyone else shares the same sentiment as I do, but this hypothesis kind of revolves around the relationship between Moroccans and Semites, the Jews specifically.